So, good evening or good morning, depending on where you're watching this from. Nice to be here. We've got a very interesting topic to discuss with you tonight. I'm joined by the gorgeous Delcia from our Relationship Code partners in Sydney. And Delcia, this is a really great topic. I'm really keen to be talking about this one.
Yeah,
Parenting partners.
parenting your partner. Thank you for entertaining the subject.
So tell me about parenting your partner. What does that mean?
Ooh, well, we all know what parenting is, and
Yes.
typically that is something that an adult does with their child.
Yep.
But what is perhaps more uncommon or most people aren't aware of is parenting in an adult relationship or an intimate relationship with your partner, spouse,
Yes.
girlfriend, boyfriend. And essentially, it's when one person in the relationship takes on the responsibility for their partner in ways that they would take on a responsibility for a child. And it can
Right.
look and come out in many different ways. But that's essentially
Excellent.
what it is.
Excellent. Well, so for those of you that are watching tonight, if you've got any questions as we work our way through this topic, pop them up in the chat. We want this to be very interactive. We want you to get, value out of being here with us. So if you've got any questions, use the chat. You'll find that down below. If you move your mouse to the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a list of menu there and you'll see chat. And just click on that and ask us a question. So, Alicia, do you have personal experience with parenting a partner?
Oh, yes, I do. I I didn't know I was doing it until after I think I attended the second relationship code event and I started recognizing some patterns that
Yes.
fit the description of parenting your partner.
Yes.
Before that, I think I mostly recognized this pattern without knowing what to call it in my conversations with friends and some of the
Right.
clients in the work that I do. Um,
I think this is pretty common for women, isn't it? Like
yes.
women naturally tend to be more nurturing than men. Not that men aren't nurturing, but women tend to adopt that role more, right? And
Yeah.
they, step into parenting. So do you think it's something that's quite common for women to step into in terms of, looking after their husband?
Absolutely. As you say, women are wired to meet unmet needs, not just for their partners, but for anyone. We're conditioned um, as this feminine race to be carers, to be caretakers from a
Mm.
very young age. And so it feels almost instinctual and natural for us to support, to help, to offer our care when someone is in need. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think it does go both ways, but it's more common for women to find themselves in the role of parent.
So, what did you notice in yourself? So, you said you attended the second relationship code event,
Yeah.
right? And then you noticed some behaviors. So, what behaviors did you notice that you hadn't seen before that you were doing?
I think it's hard to admit it, but the biggest one for me in terms of this
Yep.
pattern is the need to control and have things done my way. And I
Right.
recognized that very early on when we had our first child was I was a qualified trained teacher. I was the owner of a preschool and I was the expert on children
Right.
because I had
Yep.
studied this. And so I always felt like my way was better. And
Yep.
it was really hard to allow Christian space to do it his way. And
Yes.
typically that's what our arguments would be about. Like him not
Hmm.
doing it the way I told him or showed him how to do it.
Right. And there's a security and safety aspect to this as well, isn't there? Like
Absolutely.
as a woman, if you're more in control of that, it gives security and safety, doesn't it?
Yes, yes. So there's usually two reasons why, and I think I tick both the boxes that
Hmm.
we become the parenting partner. The one is this fierce independence, which I admit I am and have
Hmm.
always been fiercely independent. And so
Yes.
the risk of that being taken away from me puts me in the position of needing to control. And then the second is I don't trust that it's going to be done.
Yes. And that sometimes comes up for women, right? In terms of taking control of things. And we're getting a little bit off the topic here because it's more about controlling him. But in terms of him not stepping up and doing it the right way, that's quite a common feeling for women, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yes, because in our way, we feel safe if we know it gets done this way. And especially when it comes to raising children, like I know how this works, I know what my child likes and needs, and then
Mm.
we tend to transfer how we treat our children to how we treat our partners.
So in what other way would you have been parenting him?
Other than the control, the second one, which again, these are all very hard to acknowledge, but as we acknowledge them, we get to work through them, is really the tone. As a result of that, the tone that I use when I communicate what I'm needing or
Yes.
asking for can come across as like, come on, you should know this already. Like, why do
Yeah.
I have to be the one to tell you how to do it, where to go, where to find it? And I
Yeah.
tend to have that reaction. And I've done a lot of work with children, and I know what that feels like for a child to receive that tone. But when I'm doing that with my partner,
Yeah.
it's it it shows the divide. It's like we're not on equal footing. I'm one up better than you, no more.
Absolutely. And there's a psychological basis for this. Eric Berne, a very famous psychologist back in the 60s and the 70s, wrote a book called Games People Play. And he highlighted there are a couple of positions that we can put ourselves in. One is parent,
Yeah.
the other is child. And one of the dynamics that we've certainly seen over the last 20, 30, 40 years has been that coming out of World War II, a cultural shift happened where not only did a lot of men die in World War II, and hence they became precious, when in the 60s a boy child was born, they tended to be overmothered. They were very precious. A lot of people and men had died in that period. So mothers tended to, become helicopter parents. And I guess that's probably where it actually started, right? Where they jumped in and over-parented men. Now, what happens is we get conditioned in three main ways. Firstly, from culture, secondly, from events, and thirdly, from the role models that we have. And as a man, if we experience over-mothering, then what we tend to do is transfer that model of woman onto the woman that we're with. So it's not just you stepping up into that role of being parent and him stepping down into that role of being child. Often at times, he's quite happy to step into that because that's normality to him in his relationship with his model of woman. But as a woman, you must have found that extremely frustrating. So although you stepped into control for security and safety, on the other side of that, there must have been something else happening, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, the result is resentment, as we know. We eventually fall into resentment. But just to backtrack on what you're saying is in the beginning of a relationship, it's quite common because it's the honeymoon phase for it to be really cute for your partner to show up as this baby that needs caretaking and there can be a lot of affection in that, but it soon wears out and then it becomes something that you resent and it becomes exhausting, just the drain of energy and having to read your partner's mind and know what they're needing and cater to their every need. So we show up as these two mature adults in the beginning of the relationship, and then depending on the circumstances or the stresses or the challenges that show up, then that needy infant part of us appears.
Yes.
And this is for both men and women. And then that's when we turn to our partner expecting that caretaking. And if you're
Yes.
not aware that that's happening, then we could easily fall into this pattern of doing it.
And how is that for a woman to be caretaking your partner, parenting your partner? How does that eventually feel?
Exhausting, but I think the biggest thing it does, especially if you have children, so a woman has children she's already taking care of,
Yes.
it kills the intimacy in a relationship. It really is like poison in the space that's supposed to.
Why, from a woman's perspective, will it kill intimacy in a relationship?
Well, there's nothing attractive. Nothing
Exactly.
attractive about a man who's acting like a child.
Yes, and also for a woman, like we often hear women say, I've got two kids, but really I've got three.
Yes.
And what she means is I'm taking on that responsibility. I'm worrying about him. I'm constantly trying to, fix him or caretake him or look after his needs or anticipate his needs. And eventually that just wears off to be really irritating.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's the
And in
resentment from
birth,
her side, and I think from the partner's side is this resignation, because they're almost in this helpless position, which has become the dynamic.
yeah. And men often in this situation, although they enjoy the caretaking, the running around and her looking after him, what they start to notice, of course, is that her attraction for him lessens.
Yeah.
Now, that's not conscious initially, but they eventually feel it in terms of disconnection with their wife. And then they wonder why, the sex life is not as good. They wonder why the connection's not there. They wonder why they're not enjoying each other as much as they did in the infatuation and honeymoon stages of the relationship. And for a lot of guys, it's not obvious that this is actually happening.
Yeah.
And it becomes critical to notice these things when they are happening. And of course, it can happen in reverse as well. Often a man wants to step into the role of rescuer,
Yes.
and she wants to step into the role of princess to be rescued.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So that's when a man's parenting his partner. And one way to identify if that's happening is to understand that we typically attract partners of the opposite sex that are our parents. So I would attract someone that was like my dad, and
Yes.
Christian would attract someone that was like his mom.
Yes.
And we're familiar with that. So as soon as we get really comfortable in the relationship, then we default to those patterns. It's the same with your birth position. As the eldest child, I naturally took responsibility for my younger sibling, and then the relationship I had with my dad. So those are patterns that I know. And
Yes.
we've been married for 15 years, and I can see us, if we're not aware and conscious of it, we just naturally fall into those patterns and then
Yes.
expect that from each other. And then
Absolutely.
put that on each other, knowing like, oh, you're so much like my dad and you're so much like my mom.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah. I've married my father. Oh,
I married my
goodness.
father, I married my mother. Yeah, and we're not exactly the same, right? But there are certain patterns of behavior that end up being the same because we're used to those, we recognize those. In a sad sense, they feel comfortable to us, even if they're not good for us.
Yeah.
So a guy can certainly parent a partner, and Renee's asking that question now. What that tends to look like from a woman's perspective would be more that he's initially being the rescuer, running around, doing everything for her, taking care of everything, almost the perfect husband.
Yes.
But eventually that starts to extend to now more subtle control,
Yeah.
where it becomes somewhat like, oh, no, I don't think you should wear that dress tonight. That doesn't really suit you.
Yes.
And so it becomes, the control becomes very, very subtle in terms of how it's done, almost imperceptible to her. And she'll only realize it when, at some point in the relationship, in the marriage, she'll go, hang on, this doesn't feel like it used to. Hang on, I think she would use the terms, I've lost myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have a say anymore, and I've got your voice in my head. And again, you bring up control. So it goes both ways, whether it's a woman parenting her partner or a man parenting his partner. It
Absolutely.
tends to end up as a way of controlling, because if you think about it, unhealthy parenting would be trying to control your child, which means you're not accepting them as they are. And you
Yes.
think that you can change them, or as you say, mold them. They're this piece of
Yes.
clay that can be molded.
Look, and I think that's a really good metaphor, because often when we're in a relationship, what we're attempting to do is change our partner. We can influence our partner. That's very different. And it's like influencing a child, right? We all know, if you're a parent, you try and tell the child what to do, that's not going to fly.
No, not at all. No.
But influencing them, showing them what right action is, that's very effective. And it's exactly the same in a relationship. So, Renee makes the good point that I don't believe culturally we recognize when a man is parenting his wife as much as we recognize when a woman does it.
Yes.
It's different because of the difference in the nature of men and women.
Yeah.
A man's form of parenting, if you look at how a father parents, it's much more control orientated.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
A woman's form of parenting is much more nurturing.
Yes, exactly.
And so when a man is parenting his partner, it is going to come across as control.
Mm.
So if you recognize that this is happening in your relationship, how did you change it?
Well, the first thing is admitting that this is what is happening.
Big one, right? That can be hard to do.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to say, yeah, actually, I am nagging my husband. I am in the position of, when he can't find something, I'm the one who goes to find it. Or
That must have been hard, right? As you recognize that, letting go of doing that
yeah, yeah,
must have been difficult. And I think it's also important to recognize that we need an outside perspective. That's why we do things like the Relationship Code event,
yes,
that a person can go there and get an outside perspective of themselves in a really caring, nurturing environment to see that they are doing these things that are actually not working for them. So you must have found it tough, Delcia, to let go of that and start to react differently to him. Because
absolutely. Yeah, no, I did. And when I realized that what I did immediately was just pull back, it's like, no way am I going to be your parent, especially when I was exhausted from parenting my own children. So
yes,
it was just a complete stop. And that obviously created a lot of tension and confusion and disconnection because, hey, you're not the way you were before. What's wrong? And I didn't have the language or the skill to communicate that. So I just cut off any care. And then coming through, as you say, to the event where people can show you yourself in a loving reflection of what you're
yeah,
doing, and then
yeah.
learning how to step slowly away. But it's a practice and it takes time. It didn't happen with one event or overnight. Absolutely not.
How did Christian react to that when you started to stop parenting him?
Yeah, he was just confused, and it created a whole lot of arguments because I didn't communicate what I had recognized was happening or how I felt
Yes.
about it. I
Yep.
just I just shut down. And so he was confused and he speculated. He went into his mind thinking she doesn't love me anymore. I'm not making her happy. I'm not good enough for
She's
her.
not running around doing all the things that she used to. She's not telling me what to do.
Yeah. He was in the dark. He didn't know what was going on. And I was sitting with this information and I'm like, I don't know how to tell it because again, there's that fear of, well, is this going to hurt his feelings? How do I address this?
Yeah.
How do I address this? Because I don't know what to do with it. I know what I'm doing, but I don't know how to get out of it. And
Yeah.
that's where, support and skills and the most helpful thing for me was really the pattern, understanding why I'm doing what I'm doing. So knowing that it's my strategy for finding safety. If I'm
Yep.
in control, if I'm
Yep.
managing everything, then I'm safe and secure. When I don't know what's happening, or I don't know if you're going to do it my way, then I don't feel confident and I don't feel secure in myself or in the relationship. So understanding that helped me know why I do it. So I don't judge myself as much anymore. It's more,
Yes.
I don't really feel safe, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you make the distinction of not needing to be safe and then altering the behavior? So that must have been like emotionally, it must have been difficult. So you must have felt, did you start to feel unsafe as you let go of control? Or,
Not
had
so much
you,
unsafe, uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And
Okay.
physically for me, so it's like trying to don't say anything. Just trust.
And I guess having seen it, right, you would have wanted, you had an incentive to want to stop the behavior. So
Yes.
whilst uncomfortable, you still wanted to push through that uncomfortableness to get to the point where you weren't doing it anymore. Has it changed the relationship a lot?
It has, because now we can have honest conversations about it, which is nice. I mean, those aren't comfortable, but we get to call each other out when it's happening. And I
Right.
am in a much better position to say, I'm not doing this, or I don't want to do this, or I need you to step up. I
Yeah.
need your support. I need you to be, especially when it comes to the children, like it's easy, I think, for men like Christian who are quite playful and he can be one of the boys. And then I do feel like I'm the adult in the home with three
Yes.
playful boys. I don't get their jokes. I don't understand what's funny. And so sometimes I'll say, I need you to stand next to me. I need us to be two adults here now. And that
Yeah.
doesn't, and that communication doesn't come across as criticism anymore because he understands why I'm communicating that. So yeah, it's definitely improved a lot of the way that we communicate and understand one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that dynamic we were talking about before of Eric Byrne and parent-child, what he explains is that we don't want to be in parent or in child. We want to be in adult as two adults standing together.
Yes.
And that requires an adjustment, particularly if we've been conditioned from experience, from the culture as well, to show up in that way. Because it says Katie, but I don't think it's Katie because it's a guy asking the question, right? He's in the situation where his wife is parenting in the sense of telling him what to do because she's got a long list of things that need to be done. But so there are two things that come up in that question to answer it. The first is that if something's not done, that immediately goes to a woman's sense of security and safety. If it's not complete, okay, now there's an anxiety that it's not complete. So a woman is always going to raise, and that's where if we don't understand the difference between men and women, we can take as a man that is, as you call it, nagging, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she doesn't mean it as nagging. What she's doing is she's surveying the kingdom, your lives together, and going, okay, this area has not been taken care of. It needs to be taken care of, and it needs to be taken care of now. And that's your area, so I'm going to allocate it to you. But as a woman, I think you have to get to a balance point with that because you can be on his back all the time. You can also dump everything to him that he needs to do it when you're probably quite capable of doing it yourself. So there is a balance with that has to be learnt to, thanks, Joe, to get that communication right and that balance right in communication. Because what we're all attempting to do in a relationship is be able to communicate without moving to resentment. People don't fall out of love. We fall to resentment. The second part of that, Joe, is what you're describing is a typical way that a man processes communication and information. And that is, yes, we have boxes. When she starts talking, we get one box out from what she's talking about at the beginning. If she's gone on to topic number 5, we're still going to be on box number 1. And as a woman, you can recognize this with men and give him time to process the first thing that you've said. Allow him that time to process it instead of just going boom, 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 boom. Like I was with Marie just before we came on to the talk, and she started talking about something, and mid-sentence, before she'd even finished talking about that thing, she was talking about something else. And I had to say, whoa, hang on. Let's talk about the first thing before you go to the second so we can, reach a conclusion on that, because that is definitely, men are very sequential in what we do, and that can trigger this parenting dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah.
You must have seen that with Christian in the early days, right?
Yeah. And if I can just echo what you're saying, but with an example, what you're essentially saying, and this is for you, Joe, is there's the sense of urgency in a woman's mind around what needs to get done. So when she's passing you a list of things that need to be done and she's coming back to check in, has it been done? There's 2 ways she could do it. It's like, you haven't done it yet. Like, come on, I asked you to do this last week. Or, and that's one tone that can be a parenting tone, or if she's aware of her request and her need, she could give you the list and prioritize the top 3 with a timestamp. Like, I really need these done. They're urgent for me. So can you get this done by Saturday? And let me know when it's done. And then I can step back and say, I've given him a deadline. And when I get to Saturday, I'll just be like, how are you going with those 3 things I asked you to do? Very different approach. The first one is like, why haven't you done it? That's a parenting tone. The second one is, I'm just checking in. Adult to adult. How are you going? Where you at? Can you give me an update? Because if there's no communication, there is this sense of urgency, and that ends up sounding like nagging. I need this done. When are you getting it done? You haven't let me know anything. Should I just do it by myself? And then we spiral into that, right?
Yes.
So it's tone and language around that, but also appreciating the urgency, because our minds don't stop. We've got the list for you, and then we've got the list for the kids, and the list for ourselves, and then the list for work, and the list for the groceries. And it's just constant. So when we pass something on and we nag about it, we just want to get that out of our mind so we can move on to the next thing. Yeah.
That's a really big difference, isn't it? That most people don't recognize for women is that, sure, as a man, our mind is busy, but it's not busy in the same sense as a woman's, in that it's all about the to-do list. And one of the things, we have a men's group called the Brotherhood, where men come and do the Crucible event, which is specifically just for men. And one of the dynamics we talk about in that is that, unlike a woman, when we're focused on something, we're focused on that one thing and getting that one thing done. So if something else comes into that, it's very difficult to take our focus off that and focus on this new thing that's happening, unless it's absolutely critically dangerous or urgent in some sense. Whereas for women are juggling 10 balls at once. Mm-hmm. And constantly thinking about that one ball that's up in the air that he's meant to be doing. Yeah. And if he hasn't done it, I've got to keep that ball going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And men don't get that. Like, we don't have the visceral or body or mental experience of having to do that, to keep the ball going in the air. Yeah, we might have a lot of things that we have to do, but we do them sequentially. Women do them as a collective thing that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference in experience for a woman. So she is naturally going to raise that all the time. And again, ladies, if you're not careful, you're going to step into that mother parenting role with him. But I know for a lot of women watching Delcia, what's going to be popping up for them right away is going to be, yeah, but what happens when I tell him, like, I've told him 3 times to do it and he still hasn't done it?
Yeah. Yes. Then when you're not aware, then you end up just doing it yourself or what another unhealthy pattern that I noticed was I just stopped asking. It's like, I know I can do this. I'll just get it done and I won't ask. But that also leads to resentment. So yes. There's a level of acknowledging what it is you need, asking for it. And that word urgent is really important. I've learned to say when something is very important to me. Yes. And when I don't put an urgent stamp on it, then I'm like, you know what? It'll get done. I've handed it over. I'll just check in every now and then. But I've realized that for Christian, especially when I say, this is important to me, please, could you do it? Then he gets it done. He makes that the ball that's in his ear and he focuses on that.
Agreed. Because men will divert their attention to something if it's urgent.
Yes.
Even if it's coming from their wife, because again, the difference and the dynamic is, and it can be a male trait, which is, I don't like to be told what to do, particularly by my partner, but it can also be part of the dynamic of adult parent child, where a man or a woman can go to rebellious child. You can't tell me what to do. Yeah. Now, if you're dealing with those sorts of situations, as you said, one of the first things we want to do is reach out and go, look, this is urgent or this is important. If he's still not doing it and he's gone to a rebellious child and you can't reach that, this is where you may need to reach out for assistance, to get an independent person involved to be able to explain the communication differences. Because certainly in our experience, what we've seen consistently is that when any person understands that it's a communication problem that's occurring here, that can be solved. If you say to yourself, they're just being a prick, or they're just being resistant, or they're just being nasty, or whatever, that is not solvable. If you're defining the problem that you've got in those types of terms, that is not solvable. Mm. And people don't realize that if I'm thinking about my partner that way, I'm going to use, in woman's sense, the masculine state to step into that, to attempt to get him to change. That will never work, because he will go to rebellious child.
Yeah.
Against that.
So another dynamic that, if I could just add on that, so one partner could go to rebellious child when they feel like they're being controlled. But what can also happen, and I've experienced it, is that then both partners revert to their child selves. And then you've got 2 immature infants, children, trying to get their needs met. Yes. And then it requires one to step up into adult, not into parent, but into adult, to say, this is not working. this
And that's
is
easy to say, right? That's easy as a strategy to say,
Yeah.
but to be able to move to that place inside ourselves takes personal development work to be able to do that. And Katrina raises pretty much the question that, I said before. What if he doesn't do what I say is important to me? He literally doesn't care if it's not important to him. That's what I mean, Katrina. If we view it that way, if we view the problem like that, that situation is unsolvable. Cannot solve that if you see it that way. What I would suggest to you is that is not what is actually going on. And we see this many, many times. And that's why what we do is we review the situation, look at it in a completely different way so that it becomes solvable. So in this case, there's a couple of options that are going on here. The first could be that the relationship has moved to the stage where he is in resentment now. It's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he doesn't love you. He doesn't know how to make you happy anymore. And I know as a woman, and Delcia, you might be able to explain this a little bit more, but I know that sounds weird to a woman, right? But men, believe it or not, are wired for you to be happy. They want you to be happy. But what happens in a relationship is over a number of years, you stop laughing at his jokes. You stop thanking him for the things that he does. Why should I thank him? I do lots of stuff around the house anyway. We don't understand that these things are critical in communication. And he gets to a point where he's like, doesn't matter what I do. She's always complaining. She's always got another task for me. She's never happy. Now he moves to resentment. And we've had people in their 70s come to our relationship code event and completely change around 50 years of resentment in just 3 days.
Yeah.
Because they were viewing the problem like Katrina has been viewing the problem. And Katrina, you're not alone, my love. I can tell you now, there are thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people viewing their relationship problem in this way. So we have to see it differently. So, Delcia, why do women find it hard to believe that men want them to be happy?
I think at the core of it is that feeling, the need to feel safe. And if there's a long history of not feeling safe, of not being able to trust, then it's really hard to open your perspective to understand why your partner is struggling to meet your needs. And then we get stuck in that, well, he doesn't care about me.
Yeah.
I haven't felt safe for such a long time. He doesn't care about me, and I've had to protect myself. And so we build this really strong shield around ourselves to protect our hearts. And then to move out of that does, as you say, require that help. And you can shift it around really quickly. But it's looking at yourself. It's like completely flipping that mirror and not saying you're the problem, but it's like, how am I contributing to this dynamic in our relationship? And that's painful. It needs a little bit of hand holding to do.
Yes, and that one is really hard, like you said at the beginning of this chat, right? Understanding that you were parenting Christian can be hard to look at, and it's very brave of Katrina, to raise this. And it is difficult to get that we actually have control of the relationship. And when we change, they will change. Katrina, I know in your experience, this is going to seem difficult to understand, but in our experience as relationship master coaches, we've seen this many, many times. I have not met a man yet that has come to a relationship code event and is stuck in, I don't care about her.
Yeah.
There's not one man that I've met yet in all the thousands over 30 years of doing this work. Because when they're in the event and they're being real and they've moved past resentment, what we see every single time is that the love has always been there. It's just been covered up in this blanket of resentment. Yeah. And once he understands, and this is, men can seem very reluctant to want to change these things, but that's only because they can't see a clear path to how they're going to change it.
Yeah.
That's where the event's very important, because it allows them to see that path. And once a man's like, yep, now I know how to make her happy again, he's all for it, because he sees the change in her as he steps up into that place. And unfortunately, we've both seen a lot of marriages where she has been parenting him for a long, long time. And yeah, he's used to it.
Yes.
But both of them now, she's in resentment because she has been parenting, and he's in resentment because all he feels is he's being nagged all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it must have felt like that for you guys early on too.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And to the point where me trying to find help for this challenge in our relationship
Yeah.
seemed like another attack on him, right? And so there's the resistance from men to come to these events or to go to therapy or to counseling because it just feels like now you're dragging me in to be attacked and told how I'm not good enough or not doing enough for you. And so that could be the resistance that comes in. And so it is a communication problem. And it's really about communicating that I'm not happy doing this. I want to feel attracted to you. I want to be emotionally and sexually intimate with you, but it's not attractive and I'm exhausted. And
Yeah.
and being able to communicate that in a way that, it's hurtful to hear, but it's also hurtful to admit that I played a part in that. And
And I
we
think it's really,
yeah.
yeah, I think it's a really relevant point that you make, that a woman is not, as you said earlier, from an intimacy point of view, she's not going to feel attracted to him if she stepped into that parent role and he's in child. And equally, if he's in parenting, controlling her, that sexual intimacy, that sexual tension that's required in the differences, the polarity is not going to be there either.
Yeah, I remember you saying to me, Brett, and this is something really confronting to hear and also to say, but no healthy woman wants to sleep with her son, and no healthy man wants to sleep with his daughter. And when you think of it that way, if you're parenting your partner, that's essentially what you're almost expecting or putting yourself in the position of, and that's enough for me to make an overnight decision to be like, I am not parenting my partner because there's nothing healthy about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Katrina, again, thanks, for popping these comments up because it gives us, some substance to be able to talk about things and give you some insight into it. So the lack of contribution financially comes back to a man's sense of what we call production. So, for millions of years of evolution, men have been the producers. Now, in the last, 70 odd years, that has changed. But we've still got this million years of evolution in us where men feel this need to produce. So men often, it has to be equal. She has to produce as much as me. That's a symptom. It's a symptom of what is going on in the relationship. And it's totally understandable that your nervous system is a mess. So from a security and safety point of view, this inbuilt evolutionary need in women to be safe and secure, that has always in the past been provided for millions of years by men. In the environment we're in now, that security and safety is not there in a physical sense most of the time, but it's still inbuilt to a woman's nervous system, and it has a hormonal effect. Katrina. So when a woman has been parenting or taking the responsibility, and Katrina, I know as a woman you'll recognize this, right? Stepping into the masculine state to handle all of this, that is going to put a massive load on her adrenal or her lymph gland system inside of herself. That is going to get overworked. It's going to have trouble clearing out the body and keeping it healthy. Her oxytocin levels, because of the lack of connection, are going to drop dramatically. Her cortisol levels, her hormone called cortisol, which is the stress hormone, is going to increase dramatically. And women around the world, Katrina, like yourself, are experiencing this all the time now because most women have stepped into the masculine state to deal with this dynamic that we see all the time going on inside relationships. It is the primary cause of relationships failing. And it is why old-style couples therapy or therapy does not work anymore, because this new dynamic that's come up in the last 60, 70 years needs to be looked at in a completely different way, in the way that we're looking at it, where when a man understands this dynamic, he can step up for you. You won't be getting that criticism. The contribution is, as I say, a symptom. It will no longer become a topic of conversation when we get the connection back again. How do we know this? We've helped thousands of couples achieve that change. So, for those of you that are listening and would like to deal with this, Katrina particularly, because she's raising this, the best way to deal with this is jump on a free discovery call and hear more about what we're talking about now in a personal sense directly. But I hope I've answered your question that, what you're going through. And I know it's very difficult to get the perspective for yourself because it's, you're looking at your life. We get to look at thousands of lives, thousands of them. And I can promise you what you're going through, it doesn't help you, I know, but it is absolutely true that it's happening in thousands, millions, in fact, of households around the world right now. And it doesn't matter, where you're living. We do events in the United States. We'll soon be doing them in other countries. And we deal with clients all over the world. The dynamic is exactly the same. So, Katrina, I know it's tough that you're experiencing that, but there is a solution to it. And I know it seems difficult because you say it right there. You can't see how you can move out.
Yeah.
You need to see a different picture, my love. And hopefully I've painted enough of a picture for you to be able to see that that's possible.
Yeah. And can I add to that, Brett, just saying to Karina, like when you're in the relationship where you're feeling stuck like this, it is impossible to see how. And that's why I appreciated going to the relationship code, not only experiencing for myself this reflection and being able to recognize patterns, but also hearing other people who have similar challenges and realizing like, oh my goodness, this is just, it's not just my relationship. It's not just me. This is bigger than me. And so getting into the space where, Brett and Marie understand this and us facilitators see this over and over again in these events really helps you have a different perspective because it's not just you in your home struggling with this challenge, feeling like you're all alone. You get to realize that there's thousands of other women, if not millions, and there's men in these positions as well. And it's because we don't know how that we're stuck. And once we get
you must have felt like that when you first came to the event, right? All those years ago.
Yeah.
I know you
like, oh, come, I'll try it out. And then when you actually walk away saying, okay, I have a plan, there's something I can do.
Yes.
And that's the first step. And then it's like continuing to take that step again, because sometimes it stops and you get back into an old pattern, but you recognize the pattern. And I think that's what's been most helpful, is being able to recognize when we're falling into the pattern.
Yes.
And knowing like, okay, this is happening again.
Yeah. Correct. And it's that awareness, right, that you can then deal with what's really going on. And Katrina asked another really good question. She says, so, what about when you find that your values are not aligned? Well, again, Katrina, I get it's going to be difficult to see this picture, but let me paint it for you. The values are, again, a symptom of what is going on. Where you get to when you get reconnected again, you're obviously together still because you, underneath the resentment, do love each other. Now, sometimes people are too frightened to leave. I get that. But even in those situations, there is still love underneath that. It's just been covered up with this resentment. So the values become a symptom. And where we get to a place where there is nothing more important than our connection. We can argue about things. We can disagree about things. But we maintain the connection. It's called healthy arguing. We maintain the connection the whole time, even when we disagree about values. That's where we can get to.
Yeah.
Even parenting values, absolutely. Yeah. That's one of the big topics, right? Delcia is not only a relationship coach, she's also a parenting coach. And so she deals with these issues all the time. And sex, money, and kids are the three main things that people argue over, Katrina. And you're going to, if you come to the event, you're going to see how you parent your children in a very, very different way. Because children model us. They model who we are, not what we do. They model who we are. And when we alter that about ourselves, immediately children notice the difference. I remember many, many years ago that We had this beautiful lady come to the event. Her and her husband came, and they had a 9-year-old daughter, had 3 kids and a 9-year-old daughter. And after the event, they walked into the house, and this little girl ran up to her and gave her this massive big hug, and something that she would normally not do. And she looked up at her mum and looked up into her face and said, "Mummy, Mummy, your heart's open." That's how intuitive children are. That's the real parenting that goes on. And often we get into a situation in a relationship where our heart was open in the early stages of the relationship. But over the years, when we get to this thing called resentment, we start closing off our heart. We put on what we call a chest plate. And then our partner can't feel us, and we can't feel each other, because relationships, it's not about values. It's not about differences of opinion. It's about whether we're open to each other or not. And that's, Katrina, where the real connection happens. That's where the real magic is. And that's what we're able to create in the Relationship Code event, is that real magic of people reopening their hearts again, feeling that connection, because communication is 93% what we don't say. 7% is the words, Katrina. Values, the words. 93%, and this is a scientific study, it's not just my opinion here. It's we read each other as human beings. Read body language. Most of it is body language. And we can know whether our partner is open or closed to us without a word being said. And when we learn to keep that pathway open, that's where the real magic happens. And magic does happen inside the event. You know, we've had people separated, living in different houses, come back together. We've had people wanting a divorce. They've already got the lawyers involved. They've got the agreement done. And they still come back together.
Yeah. And can I add to that, Brett, just on communication and how that ties into this dynamic of parenting your partner? In a parent-child relationship, there's a natural understanding that we have to kind of read our children's minds because their language is still developing, especially with an infant. And then you have a child who's having emotional dysregulation or a tantrum or a meltdown. And as a parent, you instinctively, oh, what's wrong? Did you get hurt? Or are you disappointed? But then when you, and this is what the parents I work with, mainly mothers, is their frustration is when their partner is expecting them to read their mind. And that's why communication is so important. So yes, 93% is nonverbal, but from recognizing that nonverbal communication, then we have the skill to say, I notice you're distant. I notice you're not smiling or you're not happy. What's happening? Share with me what's going on with you.
Without our partner taking that as a criticism or going into resentment about it.
Yeah.
And that connection that I'm talking about that we can maintain open is it's a decision whether we close ourselves off. We all know as children that there are situations and environments that we're in that necessitated us, well, we thought it necessitated us putting a chest plate on and closing off our heart to protect ourselves emotionally. But as adults, we don't need to do that anymore. We can keep our hearts open and we can ask our partner, look, you know, we've both been really busy. We haven't been connecting. Let's go and have a coffee right now and reconnect. And let's, you know, open our hearts to each other and have that intimate conversation. So Todd asked a question, if I come to your weekend workshop on my own without my partner. So Todd, hundreds, thousands of people come without their partner. And what we've consistently seen is that when one person changes, the other person notices and, more importantly, experiences that change. You know, just 2 events ago in San Diego, in California, we had this beautiful lady come along all by herself. Her and her partner, they were getting divorced. He was like, he's out. I'm done. I'm not interested. You can go to that event. I don't care. I'm done. She came to the event, went home. That very afternoon, second day after, he's on the call to one of the facilitators going, I don't know what's different. I don't know what's happened, but I'm in. And that is the power that we have as human beings to influence someone else, because we show up differently. We'll communicate differently. There's a massive difference, Todd, between our head communication and our heart communication. And our heads might be very useful at work and, you know, building things and doing stuff like that. but it's heart communication that is essential inside a relationship. And I don't know about you, Todd, I used to be crap at it. You know, I've been doing this type of work now for 35 years, but I can say back in my 20s and 30s, I was hopeless at it. I was always communicating to my wife from my head, and it was totally ineffectual. It totally created a block. It totally pushed her away, and it just was not where we need to be in terms of communication. Now I know how to communicate to my wife from my heart. I can read when she needs a hug. I can read when I have to stand there and listen to her. Mm-hmm. So I know those things like Delcia has been talking about, right? We can read each other. And when we heighten those emotional skills, as you will do inside the event, you will see a different effect on her because you will be communicating differently to her.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's called the relationship code, but when you come into the event, you're really starting by looking at the relationship you have with yourself. And as you're saying, Brett, like where you're communicating from, really getting to identify the relationship you have with yourself and how that translates into the relationship you're having with your partner. So if anything, there's just, you walk away with so much more clarity around what your contribution to your challenges in the relationship are. And so whether your partner's there or not, you receive the clarity.
Yeah.
You can bring that into your relationship.
Yeah, because I know you did the event together initially with Christian, but you've both been since at separate times.
Yeah, yeah.
And always a good thing to do. Like I know when I first started doing this type of introspection and improving my relationship skills, I think I did the event like 20 times in a row to really master it. Hopefully, Todd, you don't need to be as dumb as me and do it 20 times, but you will definitely get that effect. And you'll see, I don't know where you're based, but you'll see there are lots of other singles in the event as well doing exactly the same as you intend to do. Yeah. So, Delcia, thank you so much for being here. Before we finish up, I just want to put it out there. If anybody has got any other questions, please pop them in the meeting chat right now. So we'd love to answer them before we finish up.
Yeah, so Katrina's got one. For when is the event? Well, it depends on where you are, Katrina, because we have Sydney, Brisbane, Perth. Perth's is coming up next. That's right, Brett? Yeah.
Correct. Yes. And Katrina, if you have a look at our website, which is just relationshipcode, all one word, .org, and maybe if Christian, our moderator, could just pop the web address into the chat for her. If you go to that on the first page, the landing page, you scroll down, you'll see a section there about the Relationship Code event, and it's got all the dates for the various cities. So the next event coming up, Katrina, and we'd love to host you there. And as I said, if you want to know more directly, please also feel free. There's a booking link on that page as well. Book a free discovery call, and we can have a chat about that. Any other questions?
There's one that just came through from Katie.
Yep.
When your partner's in a parenting mood and you can recognize it, any tips on helping them to recognize it?
Sorry, I missed that. If you could say that again.
When your partner is in a parenting mood and you can recognize it, any tips on helping them recognize it?
Oh, that's a tricky one. See, you've always got to like pick your times, Katie, when to approach your partner, particularly as a woman to a man. You know, as I said, men tend to take those things as criticism, unfortunately, if they're not aware of how a woman communicates. So firstly, pick your time. You know, when he's relaxed, open to a conversation, maybe when you're walking with him as an example. And, you know, just start the conversation with things like, I was on this really interesting chat the other day. They were talking about communication dynamics, adult, parent, child. I recognized I'm doing this. And lead into the conversation that way is a great way of opening up that conversation.
Yeah. And I think if I could add to that, Katie, because now as I read your question, I think you meant parenting mode, or it's Joe. I'm not sure, Joe or Katie. So it really is identifying first what are the parenting strategies that are playing out in your relationship. Is it the nagging? Is it the tone that they use? Is it the need to control and have it done their way? And so when you can identify, well, when you're doing this, it feels like you're parenting me, And again, you're having this conversation outside of when it's happening and coming up with agreements or code words or things that'll say a flag, like you're doing it, right? Just to keep each other accountable to that. So you help each other to step out of that pattern, and sharing how that feels. So, but first you have to be able to identify what it is that feels like parenting or that is parenting so that you can call it out. Yeah.
Great. Todd says, I've been to great events before, Todd. We all have. And I totally agree. So our event is designed very specifically to be very different to that. We've all been to events and, you know, you take great notes, you've got an awesome workbook and you go home, you put it on the shelf and you don't never pull it out again. So our event is designed around the understanding that human beings have what's called neuroplasticity, meaning our ability to rewire the connections in our brain from cause to reaction. And those things were caused in an event from evolution, from events that happened to us, and from modeling. And what we're now very, very good at, Todd, is enabling people to make the choice to change the behavior and rewire it in the event so that the stimulus, the thing that normally would trigger us to react in one way, is no longer connected. And we've become very, very good at it. So you won't react in the same way afterwards, is the simple answer to your question.
Yeah, it's almost, it feels like my personal experience was like once I see the pattern, I can't unsee it. So as I'm reverting to default patterns, I was like, I know what I'm doing. Why are you doing this? And then I remember the choice that I made or the options that I have. And sometimes it does need a phone call with one of the team members or the facilitators, or even one of my buddies from the event to say, "Ah, I'm doing this thing again. Help me remember what I committed to," right? But it's once you see your patterns play out and the impact they're having, and then you end up doing it in your relationship, you're aware, you're fully aware of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then it's just the consistent choice to step out of that and to do differently. Yeah.
That continual awareness. And that's, Todd, why people do come back, okay? They want to go to a high level of awareness and high level of mastery in terms of, you know, how you react to things. Best way, Todd, is go to our website that we've put up, click media at the top, and then go to testimonials. And you'll see there's hundreds of testimonials there from people directly after the event testifying to the fact that permanent change. So we do a survey after every single event, and we've got a 95% success rate in that permanent change that people say they've got from the event. As I said, we've become extremely good at it. Thank you very much, Tina, for putting that up. And if you want more on that, Todd, please just book a free discovery call, and we'd be more than happy to answer those questions and go through that with you as well.
Yeah.
So last opportunity. Any other questions before we finish up? Everyone's been great. Thank you so much for all the questions. We really appreciate it because it does make it so much. Sydney is in October. Is there anything online before that? No, unfortunately, Katrina, there is not anything online. We do live events because we know that they work. We know that they're effective. And we have done online events before, but that's why we do these, right? Because we can give you great information. But if you want that change, it does require a live event. I presume you're in Sydney. But what we can assist you with is if you jump on a discovery call with the gorgeous Delcia and her amazing partner, husband, Christian, they can do some coaching with you, different to counselling, coaching with you leading up to the event to prep you for the event. And we do have an online video course that you get once you sign up to the event that does prep you, but they can actually work with you leading up to October to start improving things immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd be happy to have that call with you, Katrina. So.
Okay, thanks. Okay, everybody, if there's nothing else, we will finish the call up. Thank
Thanks
you
for
to the amazing
Delcia.
for being here with me And thanks everyone so much for being on the call. We really appreciate your attendance. And yes, this has been recorded and it is going to go up into the Relationship Code group for you guys to watch later if you didn't catch everything.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
All right.
Bye now.